The night shift at East Haven Diner was a quiet kind of chaos. The hum of the refrigerator, the hiss of coffee brewing, the rain that tapped the glass like it was keeping time with the clock over the counter. Lena Hart wiped down the same spot on the counter 3 times before realizing she was doing it. Her hands moved automatically, her mind elsewhere, somewhere between exhaustion and the dull ache in her ribs. The bruise was fading, but not fast enough. She hoped no one would notice. Most customers never did. They came in drunk, distracted, or too tired to look at the girl behind the counter. That was how she liked it. The less anyone saw, the easier it was to pretend nothing was wrong. Except for him. The man at the corner booth, same seat every Wednesday, same black coffee, same quiet observation. Dante Moretti, the kind of man people didn't speak to unless spoken to first. He didn't fidget with his phone like the others. He didn't fill silence with small talk. He simply watched the world move around him as though he already knew how it would end. Tonight, his gaze followed her again. Not invasive, not cruel, just steady. As if he noticed the tremor in her hand when she refilled his cup. As if he knew the difference between tired and afraid. Lena gave him a polite smile and turned away, pretending not to see the reflection of his tailored suit in the chrome of the coffee machine. She didn't know who he was, only that he didn't belong in a place like this. Men in pressed shirts and cufflinks didn't come to diners at midnight unless they were hiding from something, or someone. He watched her kindness the way other men watched weakness, the way she slipped a free slice of pie to a delivery driver who looked half frozen, the way she always made sure the neighborhood stray had a bowl of milk near the back door before closing. And every time she smiled for someone else, Dante Moretti's expression shifted, not quite approval, not quite pity, something colder, sharper. At 12:03 a.m., a group of men in suits walked past the diner's windows, their reflections slicing through the neon. Lena froze mid-step, her fingers clenched around the coffee pot so tightly she nearly dropped it. Dante noticed. Her posture changed, shoulders stiff, eyes wide, breath held. She turned away from the window too quickly, retreating to the kitchen. When she came back, she was pale. The kind of pale that didn't come from the cold. Dante's gaze followed the direction she'd been looking. The men were gone. Only puddles and headlights remained outside. But something in her expression told him their presence hadn't been accidental. He lowered his cup, voice low enough that only she could hear. "You all right, Miss Hart?" She blinked, startled that he knew her name. She nodded too quickly. "Just tired, sir." He didn't believe her. Lena tried to keep working, moving from table to table like a ghost, trying to stay unnoticed. But every step she took seemed heavier, like she was walking underwater. When she turned to wipe the counter again, the sleeve of her uniform slid up just far enough for him to see the faint outline of a handprint on her wrist. He looked away before she caught him staring. Dante Moretti wasn't a man who cared about strangers. In his world, pity was a liability, and interest could be fatal. But something about her quiet endurance pulled at a thread he hadn't touched in years, the one labeled before. Before power, before blood, before he'd learned that saving people often required destroying someone else. He signaled for the check. When she brought it, her smile trembled at the edges, polite and practiced. "Rough night?" he asked, tone casual. "They're all the same," she said softly. But he heard what she didn't say. "Some are worse." He slid a folded bill beneath the receipt and stood. The movement drew the soft clink of his cufflink against the table's edge, silver engraved with a single initial. As he reached for his coat, he saw her eyes flicker toward the door again. Outside, a man in a dark suit waited by the curb, smoking. When he turned his wrist, Dante caught the flash of a cufflink identical to his own, except the engraving read, L.G. Leonard Graves. The name meant nothing to her. But to Dante Moretti, it explained everything. The bruises, the fear, the way she never walked home the same way twice. He stepped out into the rain without another word. The air smelled like oil and thunder, and he stood for a long moment watching the suited man flick his cigarette into the gutter before climbing into a black Bentley. Lena locked the door behind her a few minutes later, unaware of the eyes following her from across the street. Dante's voice was quiet when he spoke into his phone. Find out who she belongs to. A pause. Then, and who thought it was a good idea to hurt her? He hung up, slid his hands into his coat pockets, and turned back toward the car. He wasn't sure if she was fragile or fighting, but either way, she was losing. The rain hadn't stopped by morning. It fell in thin silver threads over East Haven, soft enough to sound gentle, cold enough to sting. Lena Hart walked home beneath a flickering streetlight, her shoes squelching in shallow puddles. She didn't notice. Her thoughts were somewhere else, in a quiet hospital room across town where the steady beep of a monitor counted down her mother's fragile breaths. The bills came faster than her paychecks. Tips were barely enough for food, let alone oxygen refills or the latest round of medication. So, she worked double shifts, nodded through exhaustion, and smiled for customers she barely saw. Sometimes she told herself it was temporary, that one day she'd sleep through the night without worrying about overdue notices or hospital calls. But most nights, it just felt like surviving. Her phone buzzed, the screen lit up with a name she hated seeing, Leonard Graves. Her fingers trembled before answering. Mr. Graves? Lena? His voice was smooth, calm, the kind that smiled while it cut. You've been avoiding me. I've been working. You think that excuses you from your obligations? She said nothing. He chuckled softly, as if her silence amused him. I trust you still remember what I did for your mother. The hospital bills, the surgery. You wouldn't want that care to... Stop, would you? Her throat tightened. No, sir. Good girl. I'll wait outside your building. Bring what you owe me. The line went dead. By the time she reached her apartment block, the black Bentley was already there, parked beneath the only working street lamp. Its glossy surface reflected the rain, beautiful and cruel. Dante Moretti had been there first. He leaned against the hood of his own car across the street, half hidden in the shadows. He wasn't sure why he'd followed her. Habit, maybe? Or curiosity dressed as concern. Either way, something about her quiet suffering gnawed at him. He watched as she approached the Bentley, clutching a damp envelope in both hands. Graves stepped out, immaculate as always, dark suit, polished shoes, cufflinks catching the light. He smiled that practiced smile that never reached his eyes. You're late. I had to cover another shift, Lena stammered. This is everything I could get. She held out the envelope. He didn't take it immediately. Instead, he looked her over like an object he already owned. Do you know what bothers me, Lena? His tone was mild, conversational. You forget who gave you everything you have. Her eyes flicked down. I haven't forgotten. Then why do I hear whispers about you talking to people? The wrong people? I don't. Liar. The word cracked like a whip. She flinched before he even moved. Dante's jaw tightened. He shifted slightly, every muscle tensing. Graves snatched the envelope, tore it open, glanced at the cash inside, then sneered. This is barely a week's worth. Do you think I'm running a charity? Lena's voice shook. Please, I'll have more next week, I swear. He grabbed her by the arm, pulling her closer. I don't want promises. I want obedience. Her gasp was muffled by the rain. Dante took one step forward, then stopped. His instinct screamed to intervene, but instinct had gotten men killed before. He'd learned that patience was sharper than anger. Still, when Graves shoved her against the wall, Dante's composure cracked. The sound, her cry, the dull thud, echoed across the empty street. Graves leaned in close to her ear, voice low and venomous. You owe me more than money, sweetheart. You owe me silence. Then he released her. She staggered, catching herself on the wall, breathing hard. He got into the Bentley, slammed the door, and drove off without another word. Lena stayed there for a long moment, trembling. The envelope lay open in a puddle, the cash soaking into the water. She sank to her knees, trying to gather it with shaking hands. Dante crossed the street quietly, his shoes making no sound over the rain. She didn't hear him until he was close enough for her to see his reflection in the wet pavement. She froze, eyes wide. It's all right, he said, his tone soft but firm. I'm not here to hurt you. Her voice came out in a whisper. Please, don't tell anyone. He crouched slightly, meeting her eyes. In the harsh glow of the street lamp, he saw everything she tried to hide. The fear, the shame, the exhaustion that came from years of endurance. He wanted to ask what Graves had done to her, but he already knew. The type of men like Leonard didn't bruise with fists. They bruised with control. Dante picked up one of the wet bills and tucked it back into the envelope. You shouldn't meet him alone again. Lena looked away. I don't have a choice. There it was, the truth of it. No anger, no rebellion, just quiet surrender. He stood, watching her gather the rest of the money, her hands raw from the cold. She didn't ask for help. She didn't even look back. When she walked inside, she carried herself like someone trying to disappear before dawn. Dante stayed in the rain a while longer. The street was empty again, except for the fading glow of the Bentley's taillights vanishing into the city's maze. He exhaled, a slow, controlled breath. In his world, feelings were dangerous, compassion even more so. Yet, something about that trembling girl under the streetlight made his chest ache, a soundless, unfamiliar kind of ache. He had seen people like Graves all his life, powerful men who thought suffering was just a side effect of ambition. But something about tonight felt different, personal. His driver approached from the shadows. Sir? Dante didn't answer right away. His gaze was still fixed on the cracked pavement where she had stood, the faint imprint of her small hand still visible on the wet wall. Keep eyes on the Bentley, he said at last. If Graves visits her again, I want to know. The driver nodded and stepped back. Dante turned his collar up against the rain. The city lights blurred behind him, cold and distant. No one touches what's under my watch, he muttered. He didn't mean to care. But the moment he said it, he knew the rules had already changed. And somewhere, deep in the storm, a new war had just begun. The next evening, Lena was back at East Haven Diner, pretending nothing had changed. The bruise on her lip had darkened overnight, hidden poorly beneath cheap concealer. She smiled through the ache, greeting customers, pouring coffee, scribbling orders. The world didn't pause for a woman's pain. She'd learned that long ago. Still, the whispers followed her like smoke. Did you hear? One waitress murmured near the counter. The billionaire dumped her. Graves? Another replied, rolling her eyes. Figures. Guys like him don't date. They own. Lena kept her head down, wiping the same spotless table for the third time. She pretended not to hear, but every word landed like a bruise that wouldn't fade. Outside, rain tapped against the diner windows again, lighter this time, almost rhythmic, and at his usual corner booth, Dante Moretti sat in perfect stillness. He'd been there before sunset, suit immaculate, expression unreadable. Most people assumed he was just another late-night businessman avoiding sleep. But Lena could feel the weight of his gaze even when she didn't look up. When she approached his table, he spoke softly. "You shouldn't work tonight." She froze, forcing a laugh. "Bills don't pay themselves, sir." His eyes flicked briefly to her lip, then away. He didn't press further. Instead, he slipped a folded bill beneath the check and rose to leave. "Good night, Lena." Her name and his voice startled her. Warm, deliberate. She didn't remember ever telling him. When she cleared the table, her breath caught. Beneath the saucer was a stack of $100 bills, far too much for a cup of coffee and pie. On the napkin, a single initial. D. She glanced toward the window, but he was already gone. Later that night, as she walked home, the city felt heavier than usual. Her worn shoes splashed through shallow puddles, and every streetlight flickered just as she passed beneath it. Then she heard it. The low hum of an engine idling too long. A sleek black car rolled behind her at a careful distance. Headlights dimmed. Her pulse quickened. She turned once, twice. The car stayed just close enough to be noticed. Lena's breath caught as she turned down her block. She fumbled for her keys, heart thudding. But as she reached her building, the car paused at the corner. Its lights flared briefly, then it drove away. No window rolled down, no voice called her name, just the faint sense of being watched, not by danger, but by protection. She stood there for a moment, rain dripping from her hair before finally stepping inside. Her apartment was small. One room, one lamp, one fading photograph of her mother smiling before the illness hollowed her out. The silence was thick. Lena set her bag down and exhaled shakily. She opened her mail, half expecting another late notice. Instead, she found it, a final demand for payment from the hospital. Past due, termination of treatment pending. Her hands trembled as she read it. Tomorrow, they'd stop her mother's care. A sob caught in her throat, but she bit it back. Crying didn't change anything. She'd go to graves again if she had to. Beg, bargain, whatever it took. Outside her window, across the street, a man in a dark coat stood, beneath a flickering light, phone pressed to his ear. "She's home," he murmured. Dante's voice answered from the other end, low and measured. "Keep eyes on her until morning. No contact." "Yes, sir." The man stepped back into the shadows. Inside, Lena curled up by the window, staring into the rain. She didn't know someone was watching over her, or that the man who'd watched her suffer was now silently declaring war against the world that broke her. Dante leaned against his car miles away, city lights glinting off his cufflinks. He thought of her trembling hands, her hollow eyes, her stubborn grace. "She's still trying to fight," he said under his breath. But as the night deepened, one truth settled heavy in his chest. She wouldn't win this alone. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he was done pretending not to care. The rain had a memory that night, cold, relentless, whispering against the city like it knew every secret people tried to bury. Lena stood outside the Echelon Club, her thin coat soaked through, clutching an envelope against her chest. The neon lights bled crimson and gold across the wet pavement, reflections trembling like frightened hearts. The bouncer at the back door recognized her immediately. He didn't ask questions. He just opened the door, muttering, "He's upstairs." Inside, the bass from the club above pulsed through the walls. Perfume, whiskey, and money mixed in the air, thick enough to taste. Lena hesitated before stepping deeper into the dim corridor. Every nerve screamed at her to turn around, but desperation had long since drowned her pride. When she reached the back staircase, she found Leonard Graves waiting. He looked perfectly at ease, a drink in one hand, his reflection shimmering in the glass wall behind him. His smile was polished, practiced, the kind men used right before they ruined you. "Lena," he said, as though greeting an old friend. "Back so soon?" She swallowed hard. "Please, Mr. Graves, I just need more time. The hospital—" He set his drink down with deliberate care. "You've been making a habit of showing up uninvited lately." "I didn't know where else to go." Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to stand straighter. "They said they'll stop my mother's treatment if I don't pay by tomorrow. I'll work triple shifts if I have to, but please, just give me a few more weeks." He laughed softly, a cruel sound echoing in the empty stairwell. "You think I'm your charity again?" "No," she whispered. "I just thought you cared." Something flickered behind his eyes, not compassion, but amusement. "Care?" he repeated. "You forget what we agreed, Lena. You keep quiet about what you saw that night, the man who fell, and in return, I take care of you. But lately—" He stepped closer, his cologne sharp and suffocating. "You've been asking too many questions, making me look bad. I haven't said anything, I swear." "Then don't start," he said softly, almost kindly, "because if you do, your mother's care ends permanently." Her breath hitched. "You wouldn't—" "Oh, I would," he murmured. "Do you know how easy it is to make a hospital file disappear? One call, that's all." Her tears mixed with the rain dripping from her hair. She clutched the envelope, her last bit of hope, and nodded weakly. "Good girl," he said, brushing her cheek with his thumb before pushing past her toward the exit. "Now go home and remember, silence is survival." The door slammed behind him, leaving her in the echo of his footsteps and her own breaking heart. Lena stumbled out into the alley, rain soaking through her sleeves as she sank against the wall. The envelope slipped from her fingers and landed in a puddle, its contents ruined, but she didn't care anymore. Her hands trembled. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. Somewhere between the thunder and her sobs, she didn't notice the black car pull up at the end of the alley. A door opened quietly. Footsteps approached, slow, steady, deliberate. "Lena!" Her head jerked up. Dante Moretti stood beneath the streetlight, dark umbrella in hand, rain glistening on the shoulders of his tailored coat. For a moment, she just stared at him, unsure if he was real. He stepped closer, his voice low, steady. "You shouldn't be here alone." She wiped her face quickly. "Please, just leave me. I'm fine." "You're not." His words were gentle, but they left no room for argument. He shrugged off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. The warmth startled her, not from the fabric, but from the quiet care in the gesture. "You've been serving me coffee for 6 months," he said softly. "It's time I returned the favor." Something inside her gave way. The mask, the calm, the endurance, all of it cracked. She tried to speak, but the words came out as a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" He met her eyes, and for once she saw something there that wasn't calculation or pity, just understanding. Because no one should have to beg to survive. He guided her toward his car without another word. She didn't resist. The city blurred past the tinted windows as they drove. Neon lights smeared into streaks of red and blue, the rain a constant lullaby. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was fragile, like glass, heavy with the things neither dared to say. When they reached her building, Dante got out first, holding the umbrella as she stepped into the rain again. "Get some rest," he said. She nodded faintly, the coat still wrapped around her. "Thank you, Mr. Moretti." He looked at her for a long moment. "Dante?" She hesitated. "Dante." Her voice was soft, uncertain, but saying his name felt like the first, true thing she'd spoken all night. He waited until she disappeared inside before returning to his car. "Station 2 men on her street," he told his driver quietly. "No uniforms, no contact. I want her safe, day and night." "Yes, sir." As they drove off, Dante glanced once more at her dark window, where a single light glowed faintly through the rain. She was inside, clutching his coat like a lifeline, unaware that her world had just shifted, that the most dangerous man in the city had quietly claimed her protection. For the first time in months, she felt safe enough to cry. And for the first time in years, Dante Moretti felt something close to mercy. Morning came softly over the Hudson, pale light spilling across the skyline like forgiveness the city didn't deserve. Dante Moretti stood by the window of his office, floor-to-ceiling glass, immaculate marble floors, and silence broken only by the ticking of a gold pocket watch he never used to tell time. Below, men in black coats moved with precision, loading crates into trucks that bore no logos but answered to him. The world called it logistics. Those who knew better called it the Moretti Syndicate. His rules were few, but absolute. No drugs, no kids, no filth. In a world built on corruption, Dante had learned that control wasn't just about fear, it was about boundaries, the kind that kept the monsters from multiplying. He turned from the window as his right-hand man, Rico, entered with a tablet. "We pulled her financials," Rico said, tapping the screen. "She's clean. No criminal record, no debts beyond medical and rent." Dante nodded. "Her mother?" "Still hospitalized. Respiratory condition?" The bills were piling up fast. The hospital was set to terminate care this week. "And now?" Rico hesitated, a small smile ghosting across his face. "Now they've been paid. Anonymous transfer, 6 months in advance." Dante didn't look surprised. "Make sure the hospital keeps it that way, quietly." Rico tilted his head. "She'll know it was you." "She'll suspect," Dante corrected. "That's different." At East Haven Diner, the world looked exactly the same. Coffee stains, flickering lights, cheap music on the radio. Only Lena Hart had changed. Her hair was damp from the rain again, her uniform freshly ironed, her face composed. But beneath it, she carried the same unease, the kind that grows when miracles arrive too easily. At noon, her phone buzzed with a message from the hospital. "Payment received. Treatment resumed. Thank you for your continued support." She nearly dropped the device. "What?" she whispered. A number followed, a deposit too large to be a mistake. Her heart stuttered. There was only one man with that kind of reach. That evening, she marched through the rain toward Cafe Verdi, the quiet, upscale place Dante frequented when he wasn't at the diner. He was already there, seated. Near the window, a book in one hand and an untouched espresso in front of him. The contrast between them was almost cruel. She looked windblown and trembling. He looked sculpted from calm. "You paid my mother's bills." He looked up slowly, no surprise in his eyes. "She needed treatment. That wasn't your decision. I didn't ask for permission." Her voice cracked. "You can't just fix people's lives without asking." "I didn't fix your life, Lena. I prevented a tragedy." The words hung between them, sharp and quiet. She sank into the seat across from him, trembling with anger she didn't know how to aim. "You don't even know me." I know enough. He leaned back slightly, his gaze steady but unreadable. You work 16-hour days. You send half your pay to a hospital that nearly gave up on your mother. You still tip delivery boys with what little you have. And you've been afraid since the night Graves pushed a man off a rooftop and called it an accident. Her breath caught. How do you? He raised a hand. Because I notice things. The same way I noticed you limping last week. The same way I saw Graves's car waiting outside your building. Lena's throat tightened. You had me followed. I had you protected. You think that makes it better? No, he said quietly. It makes it safer. She stared at him for a long time, chest heaving, trying to find words. But instead of fury, she found something more dangerous. Understanding. Because for the first time, someone wasn't asking her to explain her pain. He had already seen it. And yet, she still felt small beneath the weight of his calm. You think you can play God, she said. But people aren't debts to erase or problems to manage. Dante's expression softened just enough to show a flicker of something human. Maybe not, but if I have the means to stop someone from drowning, I don't stand on the dock and watch. Lena looked away, blinking hard. You don't even know what Graves is capable of. Oh, I know exactly what he's capable of. She froze. What do you mean? He didn't answer. His gaze drifted to the rain outside, calm, controlled, but with an undertone of danger that hummed like electricity in the air. When she finally stood to leave, he said quietly, If he contacts you again, call me. I won't. Yes, he murmured. You will. Their eyes met, not as rescuer and victim, but as two people who had both bled in silence too long. Across town, Leonard Graves stood on the balcony of his penthouse, cigar smoke curling around him as he watched the lights flicker across the skyline. She's getting bold again, he said to the man beside him. Meeting someone in public. A man. His enforcer, Lowell, shifted uneasily. You want us to follow her? Graves smiled thinly. No, let her think she's safe. A woman like that always runs when she feels cornered. And when she does, we'll be waiting. He tapped Ash off the balcony rail. Find out who this man is. That night, Lena returned home to find two cars parked at opposite ends of her street, black, unmarked, silent. She didn't know they were Moretti's men. She only knew that, for the first time in weeks, the street felt watched. Inside her apartment, she sank into her chair, Dante's words echoing in her mind. She wasn't sure if she hated him for interfering, or if some small, treacherous part of her was grateful. And in a tower across the city, Dante closed his pocket watch. Its ticking, soft and certain. He didn't need her gratitude. He just needed her safe. But what he hadn't expected was how deeply her safety had begun to matter. The city slept restlessly that night. Storm clouds hung low over the docks, their reflection rippling across black water. The air carried the faint hum of engines, too smooth, too deliberate to belong to fishermen. Lena Hart didn't know she was walking into a trap. She'd received a call an hour earlier from a man claiming to represent Leonard Graves. He'd spoken gently, reassuringly, said Graves wanted to make things right, that he was willing to discuss reinstating her job at his company and perhaps even expand her role. Desperation makes even the cautious forget what they've learned. Now she stood on the edge of the pier, clutching her worn coat tighter as headlights swept over her. A sleek black car rolled to a stop. Two men in tailored suits stepped out, their smiles too polished to be real. Miss Hart? One of them asked. Mr. Graves is waiting, just a short drive. Her breath hitched. He said he'd meet me here. A pause. The second man's hand twitched toward his pocket. Plans changed. Something inside her screamed run, but she'd taken only one step back when another sound split the night, a low growl of an engine, faster, louder, closer. A second car skidded to a halt beside them. Its doors flew open, and the flash of metal under the docklights made the truth instant and cold. Gunfire erupted. Lena dropped to the ground, heart hammering, as bullets tore through the night. The smell of gunpowder mixed with salt air. She crawled behind a stack of crates, shaking. Shouts filled the pier, some angry, some terrified, and one that froze her in place. "Take cover!" That voice, deep, measured. She'd heard it every Wednesday at the diner. Dante. She peeked over the crate and saw him moving like shadow and precision, coat whipping behind him, eyes burning with the kind of focus only men born to command carried. One of Graves's men fell. Another dropped his weapon and bolted into the dark. Dante's crew, Rico and the others, closed in, methodical and silent. But before they could reach the black car, the driver hit the gas, tires, screeching as the vehicle tore down the pier and vanished into the night. Graves had escaped. The silence that followed was deafening. Lena didn't remember how Dante reached her. Only the warmth of his coat draped over her shoulders, the smell of smoke and rain clinging to him. "You shouldn't have been here," he said softly. Her voice trembled. "They said he wanted to talk. I thought, that's what men like him count on." He crouched beside her, eyes scanning her face for injury. "You okay?" She nodded, then winced. A streak of blood ran down her arm, not deep but enough to make her dizzy. Dante's hand steadied her. "Let's get you out of here." Back at his penthouse, the contrast was jarring. Soft light, expensive silence, and the faint hum of rain against the glass. Rico and the others had gone to sweep the perimeter, leaving only the two of them in the quiet aftermath of chaos. Dante guided her to a chair, fetched a first aid kit, and sat opposite her. He rolled up her sleeve carefully, his fingers brushing her skin. "You were lucky," he murmured, dabbing antiseptic on the cut. She flinched, more from the intimacy than the sting. "I don't feel lucky." He looked up then, really looked at her, and for the first time, the mask of the composed Mafia Don cracked just a little. "You are, because I got there first." Her chest tightened. "Why do you care, Dante? You don't even know me." He wrapped the bandage slowly, deliberately, as if every word required thought. "Because I know what it means to lose everything to a rich man who never paid for what he took." Lena froze, watching his face shift into something darker, not anger, but memory. "Someone did this to you," she said softly. He didn't answer right away. The rain filled the silence between them. Then he said, almost absently, "My father built his empire with his hands. Graves's father took it with a signature. And when my father tried to fight back, he disappeared. I was 16. Her breath caught. "You think Graves—" "I know Graves," Dante said. "Different decade. Same family, same rot." Their eyes met, pain recognizing pain. He reached for a glass of whiskey, but didn't drink. "You remind me of him," he said quietly. "Your father?" "No, the kind of person the powerful destroy just because they can." Lena's voice shook. "And what does that make you? The Avenger?" He smiled faintly. No warmth, just weary honesty. "No, it makes me the consequence." For a moment, the world seemed to shrink around them. Just the low hum of thunder, the scent of antiseptic, and the weight of two people who had seen too much. Lena's heart raced. She didn't know whether she was drawn to him or terrified of him. Maybe both. "I should go," she whispered, standing. "You're not safe." I'm never safe, she said, trying to smile. But I can't hide in your world. Then let me make sure it doesn't swallow you. Her lips parted to argue, but before she could speak, the elevator chimed. Rico stepped out, his expression tight. Boss, we've got a problem. Dante straightened. What kind? Rico handed him a tablet. Graves isn't just running scared. He's filing charges. Fraud, money laundering, racketeering, all tied to Moretti Enterprises. Lena's stomach dropped. He's going after you? Dante's jaw tightened. He's trying to turn the law into a weapon. And it might work, Rico added grimly. He's got names, signatures, fake ledgers, all planted perfectly. He's been building this for months. Dante set the tablet down slowly, the muscles in his jaw flexing. Then the game just changed. The rain outside thickened, pounding the glass like fists. Lena watched him, realization dawning that she wasn't just caught between two men. She was standing in the space where justice and vengeance blurred into one. What will you do? She asked. Dante's gaze hardened, but his voice was soft, too soft. Whatever it takes. Lightning flashed across the skyline, illuminating the faint scar along his jaw. In that moment, he didn't look like the man who'd once sat quietly in her diner. He looked like a storm given form. And as thunder rolled across the city, Lena realized something chilling. The billionaire had set his trap, but he'd just awoken something far more dangerous. The morning after the storm, the city woke to chaos dressed in headlines. Russo Finance under investigation. Board members flee as stocks plunge. Anonymous source leaks Graves' offshore files. Lena read the news on the diner's flickering television, her coffee untouched, her hands trembling around the cup. The anchor's voice droned on, calm but cutting, talking of millions vanished, federal inquiries, partners disappearing into private jets. Leonard Graves's empire, the same one that had once crushed her under invisible contracts and quiet threats, was burning. She should have felt relief. Justice, maybe. But all she felt was dread, because she knew who had lit the match. By noon, the boardrooms were in panic. Wealthy men who had once laughed behind mahogany desks now whispered in fear, shredding documents and calling lawyers. Bank accounts were frozen mid-transaction, shell companies dissolved overnight, and through it all, Graves's name kept surfacing in whispers, tied to missing money, missing people, and scandals buried too deep to stay hidden. Lena couldn't reach her mother's clinic. The phone lines were down. Every ring that didn't connect tightened the noose in her chest. By sunset, she knew what she had to do. The penthouse where Leonard Graves ruled his world stood dim and silent when she arrived. The gold nameplate beside the elevator had been pried off, and the marble lobby, that once glowed like a cathedral to money, now smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and fear. Lena stepped inside, heart pounding. The door to his office was open, lights flickering, blinds half drawn. Graves sat behind his desk, sleeves rolled up, tie undone. There were no guards, no assistants, just a man whose kingdom had been eaten alive in 24 hours. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, not looking up. "I needed to make sure you saw what's happening." His laugh was low, tired. "Oh, I've seen it. The calls, the leaks, the accounts frozen mid-transfer. Brilliant work. Your new benefactor has style. I'll give him that." Lena swallowed hard. This isn't about him. Graves looked up then, eyes bloodshot, a smile ghosting his lips. "Everything is about him. You just don't know it yet." "I came for my mother's release," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "End the debts, the liens, everything. You've taken enough." He leaned back, almost amused. "You really think you're anything but a piece on his board? You were convenient. I made you useful. He's doing the same thing now. Only difference is he plays his game with blood, not contracts. Lena's chest tightened. You're wrong. He tilted his head. Am I? Do you even know who Dante Moretti is when he's not saving lost girls with trembling hands? She didn't answer. Graves smiled wider, crueler. He doesn't rescue, he collects, and when he's done. She cut him off, her voice cracking. You don't get to twist that, not after what you did. He rose from his chair, slow and deliberate. You think this is victory? Look around, sweetheart. The world doesn't punish men like me. It just replaces them. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the rain tapping against the glass. Then Lena turned and walked out. She didn't look back. Hours later, the news broke again. Leonard Graves found dead, apparent suicide in private garage. Investigators suspect foul play. Lena stared at the headline until her vision blurred. The article was short, too short. No witnesses, no footage. Just a gun found near the body and a camera that malfunctioned. She dropped her phone and buried her face in her hands. Part of her wanted to believe it was karma, that men like Graves eventually collapsed under their own corruption. But another part whispered a darker truth. No coincidences. Not in Dante Moretti's world. When she arrived at his penthouse, she didn't knock. Dante was standing by the window, watching the city lights shimmer against the dark water. The reflection of his glass glowed amber in his hand. You read the news, he said quietly. She closed the door behind her. Was it you? He didn't turn. Would it matter if it was? Yes, she said, the word breaking through the stillness like glass, because I need to believe someone can protect without destroying. That made him turn. His eyes were unreadable, not guilt, not pride, just that calm, impenetrable silence she'd come to fear. You're asking me to live in a world that doesn't exist, he said softly. I'm asking you not to become the thing you fight. He stepped closer, slow enough for her to feel every word before he spoke it. I didn't kill Graves. She looked up, searching his face. You didn't? His voice was steady, but the weight behind it made her shiver. But I didn't stop it either. Lena's breath caught. So you knew. I warned him what would happen if he touched you again. He didn't listen. Silence. Thick and heavy, filled with everything she couldn't say. You think this is justice? She whispered. No, Dante said, his voice dropping low. It's balance. For a long moment neither spoke. The city stretched below them, restless, glittering, indifferent. Finally he said, You wanted him gone. You wanted freedom. Now you have both. Lena shook her head. Not like this. His jaw tightened. There's no clean way to win against men like Graves. There's only who falls first. Then maybe I don't want to win, she said softly. Not if it means becoming like him. He exhaled, the faintest ghost of a smile on his lips. You're still trying to fix a broken world, Lena. You think goodness survives here? She stepped closer, voice trembling. I think it can, if someone chooses it. Their eyes met, two worlds colliding, neither right nor wrong, both too far gone to return to what they were. For the first time, Dante looked uncertain. You think I can be that someone? I think you already are, she said. And for a fleeting second, she almost believed it. He reached for her hand but stopped short, the space between them charged, fragile. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. The world was still burning, even if their small corner of it stood still. Be careful what you believe in, Lena, he murmured. Belief makes you a target. She smiled sadly. So does fear. He turned back to the window. The reflection of the skyline fractured across his glass. Then I'll protect what's left. Lena watched him, knowing that line between protector and destroyer was thinning with every heartbeat. And yet, for the first time, she didn't walk away. Because beneath the shadow of revenge, something fragile and defiant had survived. The idea that even in a world ruled by power and blood, love could still draw a line neither dared to cross. The city outside roared with sirens and storms, but inside the quiet penthouse, two broken souls stood on opposite sides of mercy. She wanted to believe he could save her without losing himself. He wanted to believe she could see the monster and still call him human. Neither knew which would fall first, the world or them. The first knock came at dawn, sharp, rhythmic, official. By the time Dante reached the window, the street below was already crawling with black SUVs. No tinted limousines, no rivals in leather coats. This was worse. This was government. FBI. The letters were stark against the rain-slicked vests as agents fanned out across the entrance to Moretti Enterprises. Inside, the penthouse felt too quiet. Rico's voice crackled over the comm. Boss, they've got warrants for every office, every dock, accounts, records, all of it. Dante's jaw flexed. They'll find nothing worth using. Maybe not, Rico said grimly, but they found something else. A pause. Bank statements, offshore, Cayman Islands, under her name. The world tilted. Lena. Downstairs, the elevator opened on chaos. Agents barking orders, employees being herded into conference rooms, papers scattered like ash. Lena stood frozen beside the reception desk, her coat half on, a folder clutched to her chest. Two agents were already questioning her. Miss Hart, one said, we have reason to believe you've been acting as a financial proxy for Mr. Moretti. Offshore transactions routed through an account opened last year under your Social Security number. Her voice cracked. What? That's impossible. I don't even have a passport. The agent lifted a file. Then how do you explain your signature on these authorizations? Dante appeared then, his presence cutting through the noise like a blade through glass. She explains nothing to you without counsel. The agents turned, startled. Mr. Moretti, you can't interfere. He stepped closer, calm but lethal. Then arrest me. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, reluctantly, the agents backed off, murmuring into radios as they retreated toward the stairwell. Lena turned to him, wide-eyed. Dante, I swear I didn't... He didn't let her finish. Not here. Minutes later, they were in his car, weaving through the back streets toward the docks. The rain came hard again, blurring the city into streaks of light and shadow. Lena's hands shook. You believe me, right? He said nothing, just drove. Dante, she pressed, panic breaking through. You have to believe me. I didn't sign anything. He glanced at her then, eyes unreadable. You signed something. The question is what? Her mind raced. The only papers I've signed were at the hospital. Consent forms, bills, insurance updates. She stopped mid-sentence, realization dawning. Oh my God. What? The form, she whispered. When they moved my mother to the private wing, the woman from billing, she said it was standard procedure. The paperwork had a corporate logo. I didn't recognize it, but... He finished for her. Graves's company. Her silence was answer enough. Dante exhaled slowly, the truth crystallizing in his mind. He planned this before he died. Why? I thought it was over. It's never over, he said darkly. Graves had partners, old money, old grudges. When he fell, they needed a scapegoat. He looked at her, and they found mine. The car stopped at an abandoned estate on the edge of the Hudson. Dante's men had cleared it hours before. Empty rooms, boarded windows, one generator humming somewhere in the basement. Lena followed him inside, numb. The walls smelled of dust and damp wood. "This isn't a safe house," she said softly. "It's a prison." He turned, eyes softening just slightly. "It's protection until I clear your name." She stepped closer, trembling. "What if you can't?" "I will." Her voice broke. "And if they come for you instead?" He hesitated, then gently, "If they're coming for you, there's nowhere else I should be." The words hit her harder than any promise. For the next few hours, the house filled with silence. Dante stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, giving orders in clipped Italian to men she didn't know. Each call left him tenser than before. Finally, he said, "Graves's partners are moving. One of them, Santoro, just merged with what's left of Bianchi's crew. They've got the FBI feeding from their hands. They want me off the board entirely." "And me?" "Your leverage." Lena's stomach twisted. "So what happens now?" He turned toward her. "Now, we prepare for the inevitable." Night fell heavy over the river. Dante moved through the house like a soldier, checking locks, testing exits, loading weapons. Lena sat by the dying fireplace, her mother's photo clutched in her lap. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Graves's smile, heard his warning. He plays his game with blood, not contracts. Maybe this was what he meant. When Dante returned, his shirt sleeves were rolled, his expression grim but calm. "They'll come before dawn," he said quietly. "FBI in the front, Santoro's men in the back. They'll coordinate. One cleans up the other's mess." Lena looked up, terrified. "You can't fight both." "I don't need to fight both," he said. "I just need to keep them apart long enough for Rico to leak the right evidence to the right people." "And if that doesn't work?" He knelt in front of her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then I make sure they only take one of us." Her breath caught. "Don't say that." He smiled faintly. "You said you needed to believe someone could protect without destroying. Maybe this is my chance to prove it." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't want you to prove anything. I just want you to live." Dante's thumb traced the edge of her jaw, his voice low and steady. "I stopped living the day Graves's men buried my father. The rest has just been waiting." She shook her head. "Don't talk like that." He leaned closer, just enough for her to feel his breath. "Then tell me there's something worth staying for." Lena didn't think. She just reached for him, her lips trembling against his. Desperate, terrified, real. The kiss tasted of rain and ruin. When they broke apart, he whispered, "Stay here, no matter what you hear." And before she could argue, he was gone, stepping into the dark like a man walking toward his fate. Outside, thunder rolled over the river. Headlights appeared on the far road. Too many, too fast. Lena's heart pounded as she gripped the photo tighter. Somewhere in the house, the power flickered, plunging everything into dim orange light. From the distance came the sharp, unmistakable echo of gunfire. Dante's men shouting, tires screeching. She ran to the window, saw black vehicles swarming the gate, flashlights cutting through the rain. Dante was a silhouette against the chaos, moving with cold precision. Then a blast, blinding, deafening, tore through the night. The shockwave shattered the window. Lena fell back, shards raining around her. Smoke filled the air, and through the haze she saw him, standing still, surrounded, outnumbered but unbroken. Her scream caught in her throat. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed the room was Dante raising his weapon, not in defiance but in promise. A promise that the fight wasn't over. Cliffhanger. Outside, sirens wailed. Inside, silence settled over the burning estate. The war graves began was reaching its end, and in the middle of it stood two names entwined by blood, betrayal, and the last fragile thread of trust. The final showdown was coming. The night burned. The first explosion tore through the east wing of the safe house, scattering debris into the rain. Windows shattered. The air turned to smoke and gunfire. Lena woke to the sound of shouts, harsh, urgent, unfamiliar. Boots on gravel, bullets slicing through glass. "Dante!" she screamed. He was already moving, barefoot, shirt half-buttoned, pistol in hand. "Down!" he barked, pulling her behind an overturned table as another round of shots ripped through the walls. She could hear them outside, men yelling orders, their accents rough, Sicilian, Santoros. "They've found us," she whispered. "No," Dante growled, checking his clip. "They followed us." The front door burst open. Flashlights flared. He moved like shadow. 2 quick shots, 2 bodies down. He didn't aim to kill anyone except those who came through the door. He never shot twice. "Stay low," he ordered, sliding her a small revolver. "If anyone touches you, you shoot." Her fingers trembled around the weapon. "What about you?" His jaw tightened. "I'll end this." Then he was gone, a dark blur through smoke and chaos. Outside, the rain hissed against fire. The safe house was half collapsed, its timbers glowing red. Dante moved through the ruins, one man against a dozen, his movements sharp and precise. He wasn't fighting for his life. He was fighting for hers. Each shot was a heartbeat, close, controlled. He could have escaped alone. But the thought never crossed his mind. Inside, Lena crouched under the table, pressing her hands to her ears as gunfire echoed around her. The revolver felt heavy, useless, until one of the attackers broke through the side door. He saw her, sneered, raised his weapon. Lena didn't think. She fired once. The man fell. Her whole body trembled, breath ragged, heart racing. She dropped the gun, staring at her hands. Then Dante's voice cut through the noise. "Lena, move!" He was bleeding, a line of red across his shoulder, dark and wet, but his eyes were clear, his voice steady. "Come on!" She ran. Together they burst through the back exit into the storm. The docks below the cliff glimmered with moonlight. A boat waited, small, hidden. He staggered as they reached it, clutching his side. "Dante, you're hurt. It's nothing. It's everything." He didn't argue, just started the engine, teeth clenched against the pain. As the motor roared to life, flames from the burning safe house reflected off the water like a city of ghosts. They left it all behind. The mansion, the war, the past. 2 days later, the Mediterranean. A villa sat on a rocky hillside above the sea, quiet and sun-soaked. The walls were pale stone, the windows open to the salt breeze. Dante slept on a narrow bed near the balcony, his wound bandaged, his breathing slow but steady. Lena sat beside him, washing the blood from her hands. It had taken all night to stitch him up, her fingers shaking, her tears falling quietly onto his skin. Now the danger was far behind them, and yet, in the silence, her heart still raced. She'd never seen the ocean like this before, endless, gentle, alive. The sound of waves felt like a lullaby after weeks of running. When he finally stirred, she looked up quickly. "You should be resting," she murmured. His eyes opened, tired but sharp. "If I rest any longer, you'll start charging rent." A small smile broke through her exhaustion. "You saved my life again." He shook his head weakly. "You saved mine." They sat in quiet for a moment, listening to the sea. Then she said softly, "I don't think I can go back, Dante. Not to who I was, not to pretending the world is kind just because I wish it to be." He studied her. The waitress who had once spilled coffee on his suit. The woman who had faced men with guns and still cared about the truth. Good, he said finally. Neither can I. She laughed, quiet and broken. So, what are we now? He looked toward the horizon. Free, maybe, or just tired. Morning came, golden and slow, the villa kitchen filled with sunlight and the smell of coffee. Seagulls called overhead, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Lena felt peace. She moved easily now, barefoot on tile, hair loose, humming softly. The scars of the past still lived in the corners of her mind, but they no longer defined her. Dante sat at the small table by the open window, his arms still wrapped but his eyes clearer than ever. He watched her pour 2 cups. "You still make coffee like a waitress," he said. She smiled. "And you still tip like a billionaire." As she handed him the cup, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded note. Her breath caught. He slid it toward her with a faint smile. She unfolded it slowly. Same handwriting. Same words. Some debts shouldn't exist. Her vision blurred, not from sadness, but from something deeper. The quiet knowing that the storm had finally passed. She looked up at him. "Then let's not owe each other anything." He leaned back, sunlight tracing the edges of his face. "Deal." Outside, the sea stretched endlessly, a mirror of blue and light. For the first time, Lena didn't feel like someone who'd been pushed. She felt like someone who had risen. And Dante, for all his shadows and scars, looked at her as though she were the only thing that had ever been real. No more games, no more debts, only 2 people who had lost everything and found something that mattered more. The past was smoke, the future open. She poured another cup and set it before him, teasing, "Careful, this one might be too strong." He smiled faintly, raising the cup in a silent toast. "Good, so am I." The gulls wheeled above the cliffs. The sun climbed higher. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang from a fishing boat. Ordinary, peaceful, human. Lena reached across the table, fingers brushing his. And for the first time in a long, long time, neither of them looked back. Love born from ruin, redemption through protection, and at last, silence instead of fire.